their own. And gradually, ever so gradually, over the course of time, they have come to be members in good standing in society as a whole. We have to do the same thing in relation to Mother Nature because she's the foundation of everything else in our lives. Okay. The things we're talking about here also relate to the labor laws and to employment laws. And I won't go into this now, but when you go to work, you lose your constitutional rights in relation to your employer. You don't have freedom of assembly, you don't have freedom of speech, you don't have freedom to petition, you can't practice your religion, you are not free from searches and seizures, you don't have the right to confront your accuser, and so forth and so on. I won't go into that any further now. Okay. So what is our ordinance about? First of all,
Go ahead. Next.
Okay, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead.
Talk about your ordinance. That's what we want to hear.
Yeah, we're getting there. So, because of all that complex of things around that compress the box of allowable activism, what ends up being regulated is us, not the companies that are doing the projects, that are causing harm to us. Okay, so now Naomi is going to describe the ordinance and how it addresses these various parts of the box of allowable activism.
So, as you can see, and since we have so little time, I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can. The rights that our ordinance allows are rights to self-government. If you go and read our state constitution, I believe the very first clause ends with that all power is inherent in the people. And the way things are working, it isn't inherent in the people, it's inherent in where the power lies, and it isn't with us. So our Bill of Rights allows for self-government. It allows for our ecosystems to be protected. It gives them rights. When I say ecosystems, I don't mean a puddle or molehill or any of those things. I mean things like our forests, our oceans, our bay, the eel population that feeds the orcas, that kind of ecosystem. And all of those things need to be protected because they've already been degraded. And we can't afford any more degradation. We won't have salmon if we don't have eelgrass to feed the, you should feed the, whatever it is, I can't remember. But whatever it is that feeds the salmon, and then we won't have the orcas, and the entire ecosystem will die. A sustainable energy future. All of us want to be able to count on having the kind of energy that we need to live our lives the way we've been living our lives. And we aren't going to unless we do something to make sure that happens. And as hard as it may be to do the things that it's going to take, we don't, like Stoney said before, we don't have any choice because we are smothering ourselves. 5 minutes. And we have a right to a natural climate so that my children and the grandchildren I'm never going to have, but I know that you guys have grandchildren, you have great-grandchildren, you want them to be able to breathe, you want them to be able to have clean food. You don't want them to be susceptible to the kinds of toxins that we have everywhere that are being put there because the corporations want to make money, and we aren't part of the equation. So what our ordinance prohibits is the transportation of coal through Bellingham. It prohibits corporate violations of our constitutional rights, the people's constitutional rights, not the corporate constitutional rights. It's prohibiting corporate violators from using those tools that Stoney talked about, state or federal preemption rules. And the permits that have been issued other places will have no power here in Bellingham. The permits that are needed will have to be ones that are granted here or not. So, I'm going to, is it all right if I?
One more.
One more. Oh, right, the enforcement part. So in the enforcement part, in terms of how do we do it? Where'd it go? So the city can stop the trains. An individual can stop the trains by bringing an injunction. Now, this is not going to be easy. It's not like we think this is going to be an easy deal. The Community Environmental Local Legal Defense Fund will defend the ordinance. It won't cost the city anything. If the city is sued, CELDF will defend the ordinance. So that's an issue that we can let go of. And that includes, the enforcement will include legal fees from anyone who violates the ordinance. As far as the Bill of Rights itself is concerned, do you want to take that, or shall I just?
Last couple minutes. Yeah.
Right.
Are you guys Proposition 2?
Yes.
As far as we know, although I just had a communication from the city attorney saying there may be some confusion about that. But I just want to let you know where we are in the process. This picture was taken on the steps of City Hall on March 10 of this year, when these people gathered to go out and gather signatures for the petition. We have about 5,600 valid signatures and 9,000 signatures total. My interpretation of the large number of people who signed who may not be registered voters in Bellingham is that people are just desperate to stop these coal trains in any way they can. So, at that point, I think we'll conclude, but Naomi, you can push us over to where all the websites are. Oh, there was one other. This is fine. This is fine. We're done.
Well, thank you.
More opportunities for questions. I know I'm still confused about this whole thing, so I'm hoping that there'll be clarity as we go forward. I'd like to now give the microphone to Paul Guppy from the Washington Policy Center, who has looked at this legislation, and we asked him to make some comments.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Get adjusted. Thank you. I'll watch the range so I don't go up too high. So my name is Paul Guppy. I'm Vice President for Research at the Washington Policy Center. We're an independent nonprofit think tank. We're based in Seattle, and we have offices in Olympia, Tri-Cities, and Spokane. We also have affiliated membership groups, and Northwest Business Club, in fact, is a member of ours, so we appreciate your support as being one of the groups that's a member of our organization. A quick announcement I have is, by coincidence, well, I'll put it this way, we do, after the legislative session is over, our analysts do policy forums around the state and provide a legislative briefing as to what happened during the session and what's going on with state government. This evening at 5:30 at the Bellingham Airport, we are doing a legislative session, holding a reception. There's no cost. Our analysts will be there to present a program about what happened in Olympia with the budget in the recent session. Everyone here is invited, and I have flyers right here, and I can provide you more information about that later. So that event is happening this evening at the airport. On to today's topic. So what the Washington Policy Center does is we analyze legislation or ballot proposals and look at them as to how they affect the public interest, what cost there would be to the taxpayer, how the proposal would work if it becomes law. It's a very straightforward analysis that we do. If you've looked at our website, we have a number of studies and short pieces about different laws and proposals. So when I was invited to this forum, I simply got a text of the proposal, the Bellingham Community Bill of Rights. As I understand it, this is what's being proposed. And I just read through it and made a straightforward textual analysis, and I'll share my main points with you right now, and then we can get into details during the question and answer period. And my main purpose is to hopefully be informative and raise questions about the text. or point out things that I saw in the provisions, and then respond to whatever questions you have after that. Maybe I should point out that the Washington Policy Center does not take, we're an independent nonprofit, so we don't take a position in opposition or in favor. Again, I think we were invited to provide an independent view, and that's what I'm presenting to you today. So again, very quickly to hit the main points. The first point, I guess, would be that the proposal, the Community Bill of Rights, refers to self-government, or that it creates self-government. So the first thing I thought of is, well, I think we have self-government now. So what I did was just a quick review of how our state is organized. So starting from the national level, the United States is a federation of republics. So we have 50 sovereign states within our federal system. Each of these states has, the United States Constitution says that every state government shall be Republican in form, that is a representative democracy, and that beyond that, subunits of government are created by the state. That's the current system. Now you can argue that we should have a different system, but I'm just describing what we have. So the annual Washington State Yearbook lists every county, every municipality, and it also describes the state ordinances that authorize local government, like the city of Bellingham, to be created. So that's the overview, and that's the reference work I looked at. Again, more about self-government. So all 39 counties in the state have democratic government. All the 280 municipalities and towns have elected democratic government. Bellingham is called a first-class city. There are only 11 of those in our state under state law. Bellingham has 80,000 people, so it more than meets the threshold. It has an elected mayor and city council. You all know that. So I guess what I'm saying is that's the structure of self-government that we have now. So it's unclear to me what the Community Bill of Rights would create that's beyond the participation of the people that we have now. So I'll just make that observation. Regarding creating new rights, so what the ordinance says is, I noticed that there would be a problem, in my opinion, with definitions. So it refers to the rights of residents, natural communities, and ecosystems. So under law, the phrase resident is clearly defined. These new terms, natural communities and ecosystems, are less defined. It's unclear what that would mean. It refers to the rights of municipal majorities, and nature and ecosystems is counted as part of the majority, part of the community. So, and it references air, forest, water, fish, ecosystems, and I agree that that's more than a mud puddle. You know, it's an entire system. I think that's pretty clear, but it's unclear how you count a majority when you go beyond the human residents of a particular community, like Bellingham. And again, the ordinance has, from an analyst point of view, an internal tension over definitions, because in the first couple of clauses it refers to these eco communities, and then further down it refers to lawsuits that can only be filed by, quote, human residents, so making a distinction. So it's unclear how these two categories are counted together to get to a majority, since self-government means majority rule. So I think that's confusing. There's a provision that says that the community has a right, you know, however defined, the community has a right to a sustainable energy future, but then there's a shift in the language of that clause that refers a right to something, which would imply that it's optional. It's at the will of the citizen. I can exercise this right or choose not to exercise it. But the text of the initiative actually says that government shall have the authority to require the development and production and use of energy from renewable fuel sources. So there's a shift from voluntary to mandatory within the same clause, and I can tell you which one that is if you like. It also says that the rights that are enumerated in the Community Bill of Rights are self-executed, meaning that anybody, self-executing right is like a civil right, that anyone has the right to sort of rise up and defend that. And that these rights are enforceable against corporations. I understand the description that corporation means big companies or the banks that finance them that are based in Chicago or New York and, you know, impose their, you know, enter the market in the local area. I understand that description. It's just that as an analyst, I didn't find that description in the text of the Community Bill of Rights, in the text of the proposal. It simply refers, thank you, it simply refers to corporations. So again, as everyone here knows, any business can be filed as a corporation under IRS rules. It can be an S corporation, there are limited partnerships, things like that. So there is a legal definition, just like there's a legal definition for resident, there's a definition of corporation. And again, from the text, I didn't see any distinction that it refers only to those that are headquartered elsewhere in the country or that are of a certain size. Self-executing means that anybody can bring a lawsuit. Now, municipal governments, as well as the county and the state, are obligated to defend the laws that they enact. So you often hear about the Attorney General is defending a lawsuit, even though he doesn't agree with the lawsuit, but he says it's my obligation to defend this law when it's challenged. So it's certainly true that the city government is on the hook to defend this ordinance if it's on the books. Now, other groups can contribute and help, but according to our legal principles, any entity that has a law, the city of Seattle or Whatcom County, when there's a lawsuit, the government is obligated to defend the lawsuit, of course, and bear the cost for that. And then there was, it bans the transportation of coal in Bellingham, but doesn't mention, again, by corporations, but doesn't mention any minimum quantity. So again, in terms, when we look at regulations, we think through how would this work in practice? So literally, rail or road transportation, a sack of coal in the trunk of your car, if you're perceived to represent a corporation, would be banned under this ordinance. That's what the text says. Most environmental regulations have time and place or quantity limitations, usually some minimal. If you fall below the minimum, then you're not covered by the regulation. And I looked through for a definition section and I didn't see that there. There's also a requirement, I consider this to be like a thought crime that it creates, because there's phrasing that says that any business or any corporation, I should say, which is planning to engage in activities that may be prohibited under the ordinance, shall disclose this to the city in writing 60 days in advance. So what that puts the citizen in the position of thinking, if I'm considering or thinking about a plan that might violate an ordinance, then I am required to file a plan or send it in writing to the city 60 days in advance. You might know, in the world of policy analysis, the two most powerful words in the English language are may and shall. Okay, so when a citizen is looking at his relationship to the government, the main question he has is, am I required to do this, or is this an option? So if you may have a plan, you shall report it to the city. And that, as you can tell, is a pretty high bar for anyone to reach. 1 minute? Okay, thank you. So I'll just close up by, the last point on there is that any citizen in the state can ask for these plans. So once the plan is sent to the state, anyone can get access to it. So if you have a business plan, then that's going to become public. Also, there's the question about lawsuits, that it says corporations or any other entity, again, not defined, can be sued. So, you know, if your neighbor is fertilizing his lawn, if someone is washing their car in the driveway and that's impacting the waterways of the environment, does that create cause for a nonprofit or any person to bring a lawsuit because you happen to fall under the category of other? And again, I'm going by what the text says, but maybe we can get to that more in the question and answer period. So, thank you.
Okay, I was pretty strict on everybody on the time because I wanted to leave the majority of the time. We've got 30 minutes for questions from the audience. When you're called upon, and I'll just sort of orchestrate this if I will, if you'll bear with me. Please stand up and state your name. We'll start with members of the club only. And when you ask your question, please direct it to which person you would like to answer the question. Stoney, Naomi, or Paul, or all of you above.
Can I make a brief response to what Paul has?
How about if you try to do it in answer to a question? Does that work? If not, I'll leave a couple minutes at the very end in case it doesn't get addressed. So if you have a question and you remember, please raise your hand. Really? Ellen,
I'll break the ice.
talk loud or come up and use the microphone, one or the other. Turn it on. Just
Okay, I've got a question.
and who's it of?
Stoney, I've got. Hello? Okay. Stoney, I've got a question. There are a lot of co-ops. They're corporations. Did you think ahead about whether co-ops, could co-ops enter into agreements and could they exist within this framework?